Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today we're jumping into a really key chapter from the Feynman Lectures on Physics, Volume 1. We're talking Chapter 29, Interference, our mission. To give you a quick, solid grasp of this piece, this is where physics really pivots, from charges just sitting there to, well, how light and radio actually happen. We're aiming this squarely at college-level physics students.
That's a perfect way to put it. We spend so much time on electrostatics, static charges. Chapter 29 is the big leap. It's about radiation. How moving charges, specifically accelerating charges, actually create energy that travels outwards as waves. It's fundamental for light, for radio, for antennas, everything that transmits energy wirelessly.
Okay, let's unpack this. Let's start with that first big idea.
Okay.
How a single accelerating charge creates its field. It's not simple, is it?
Not at all like the static case. The electric field, $80, it doesn't depend on where the charge is right now or even its current speed. It's all about its acceleration.
But not its acceleration now, right? There's a delay.
Exactly, because nothing travels faster than light. The field you measure, say, at a distance triller away at time $2, well, that field was determined by the charge's acceleration at an earlier time.
The retarded time concept.
Precisely. We call it retarded time. The specific earlier time is TRC. That retarders is just, well, it's the travel time for the signal moving at speed solar to cover the distance to $. The universe has this built-in lag.
Okay, so the field depends on past acceleration. And how does the field strength change with distance? That's different too, isn't it? We're used to $122 for static fields.
Right. For the part of the field that carries energy away, the radiation field, it's proportional to that retarded acceleration, but it falls off only as $, much slower than $122.
Just lullers.
Yes. If you sort of strip away the constants and direction stuff, $2 is roughly like a retarded. That dipole behavior is the signature, the absolute fingerprint of energy radiating outwards indefinitely. And because the field at any point is always reacting to the charge's history, that's inherently why it propagates as a wave. It's constantly updating based on past events.
So if you have a charge just oscillating back and forth, say its acceleration is like $t per megatang.
Yeah.
When you plug that into the physics with the retarded time,
The math just naturally spits out a solution that varies like a sine or cosine wave in both space and time.
which is basically the definition of a traveling electromagnetic wave.
Exactly. And that leads straight into talking about the energy these waves carry. That dollar thing becomes really, really important there.
Right, because we know energy density in an electric field goes as the square of the field strength, so E2.
Uh-huh. So the energy flux, that's the power flowing per unit area, must be proportional to E2 too.
Okay, so if E2 goes like $2, then E2 must go like 102.2.
Correct. The flux drops off as 102.2.
Now wait, if you just heard $102, you might think, oh, it's dying out fast like a static field. Why is that specific $102 fall off actually the proof of real radiation?
This is such a neat point. Yes, the intensity per square meter falls as $102, but think about a huge sphere around the source. With radius 2, what's its surface area?
$4 on our 2 to 2.
Right, so the area grows as $2 too.
Ah, I see it. The 100 Tautor-2 drop in flux times the Tober $2 growth in area.
They cancel out perfectly. The total power flowing through that sphere is constant, no matter how big the sphere is. It doesn't depend on tolerance time. That means the energy is truly leaving the source and never coming back. It's lost to the universe, radiated away.
And that's real energy loss. The charge actually feels a recoil force from emitting this energy, doesn't it? The radiation reaction.
It does. It's the cost of making light, essentially. You have to push against this reaction force.
Okay, that's a huge concept. So we've established we have real traveling energy waves. Now let's get the language right to describe them, especially for steady sinusoidal waves.
Right. We need the standard terms. Angular frequency to mega. The period of oscillation is $2 and 2 2bia.
And wavelength lambda. But you also introduce wave number. How does that relate?
So tolerance is about how the phase changes with distance. It's measured in radians per meter. Wavelength lambda is just $2. It's often more convenient than lambda in equations.
Okay, so lambda is 2π. And how does frequency omega relate to teller?
Through the speed of light, sino. The fundamental link is UM the collision at 80 Li equals 7, that connects the time variation to the space variation.
Got it. And this vocabulary helps us define different regions around the source, like the near field versus the far field.
Exactly. Very close to the antenna or oscillating charge, that's the near field. Things are complicated there. You have field components dropping off like 102, even 103.3. It's messy.
But if you go far enough away,
Right. Once you're many wavelengths away, those faster dropping terms become negligible. You're left only with the term that goes as $1.
that's the radiation field.
Yes, and that region is the wave zone, or the far field. Out there, the physics simplifies beautifully. It behaves like a pure outward traveling wave.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting, moving beyond just one source. Let's talk about putting two sources together and seeing interference.
Yeah, this is where the superposition principle really shines. Interference is just adding the electric fields from multiple sources at a point in space and time. But what we observe is intensity, which is proportional to the square of the total electric field, E total 2
And that squaring is crucial. If two waves add up perfectly in phase, the amplitude doubles, right?
Amplitude goes from ATA to $2.
But the intensity, it goes as 2A22, which is 4A82.
Exactly. Double the field, quadruple the intensity. That's constructive interference.
So let's use Feynman's example. Two identical oscillators right next to each other, but separated by exactly half a wavelength, lambda 22.
Okay, a classic setup.
Let's look in different directions. What if we look along the line connecting them? Let's call that the north direction.
Okay, north. The path difference from the two sources to a distant point in that direction is, well, it depends, but let's refine the example slightly as Feynman does. Assume they are oscillating in phase intrinsically. If you look along the axis connecting them, say east, one source is lambda 22 farther away. The waves arrive 180 degrees out of phase.
Okay. So along that axis, they cancel.
They should cancel perfectly along the axis if they are separated by lambda 22 and oscillating in phase. Zero intensity.
Okay, now what about perpendicular to the line connecting them? Let's call that the west direction, looking broadside.
Right. In the broadside direction, the distance from both oscillators to a faraway point is essentially the same. The path difference is zero.
So if they start a phase, they arrive in phase.
Yes. They arrive in phase, amplitudes add, the total amplitude is $2.
And the intensity is 4 times the intensity of a single source, assuming 1 unit each.
Correct. Maximum intensity broadside, zero intensity along the axis, in this specific lambda 22 case with in-phase sources.
And this isn't just a textbook exercise. This directionality is fundamental to how antennas work.
Right.
Beam steering?
Absolutely. This is the core principle. By arranging multiple antennas, multiple radiators, and carefully controlling their spacing and their relative timing, their intrinsic phases, you can force the waves to add up strongly in one direction and cancel out in others. You can literally steer the beam of energy, say, towards Hawaii or Alaska, as Feynman mentions.
Instead of just blasting energy equally everywhere.
Precisely. It's about focusing power where you need it. Feynman gives that more complex example too, right? 6 dipoles.
Yeah, separated by $2 lambda. What happens there?
With the right phasing, instead of just getting 6 times the intensity, you can get a very sharp beam with an intensity of $62 or 36 units in the desired direction.
Wow, 36 times. That's a huge gain just from arranging things cleverly.
It is. It shows the power of coherent superposition, of managing the phases.
Which brings us naturally to the math. How do you actually calculate the result of adding waves? If you just write down 2 cosine waves.
Right.
A bar OV2 plus A2 plus A coupled 1 plus A2 plus phi 2.
Oh boy, yeah. Trying to find the resulting amplitude AJO ball in phase Frigge using trigonometric identities is, well, it's possible, but it's messy. Really messy, a total headache.
So Feynman offers better ways, shortcuts.
Thank goodness, yes. He offers 2 powerful methods. Method 1 is visual, the rotating vector diagram.
How does that work?
You think of each oscillation, like a Haliber omega t plus phi bon, as the projection of a vector of length AJ1 onto the real axis. This vector is rotating in the complex plane with angular speed omega, and its initial angle is phi nono. Since both waves have the same omega, their relative angle stays fixed. So you can just freeze them at $2, treat AJ1 and A2 fixed to vectors with angles phi nono on 2, and add them like regular vectors.
Like find the resultant in first-year mechanics. Tip-to-tail vector addition.
Exactly. The length of the resultant vector is their AJ, the angle is phi or more. Much simpler than fighting with cosine sum rules.
Okay, that's clever. And method 2.
Even more elegant, mathematically. Complex numbers.
Using a theta cos theta plus I sin theta.
Precisely. Represent the real physical field, say $A omega t plus a favor, as the real part of a complex expression. A11 EIR omega t, which you can write as $A EIR omega t. The term in parentheses AIIR5 is called the complex amplitude. It contains both the magnitude $8 one and the phase A high one.
And the magic is?
The magic is that adding two waves just becomes adding their complex amplitudes. So $8 EI phi plus AA phi del gives you the resultant complex amplitude. Let's call it ARA, AR EI phi.
So you've turned a trig problem into complex number addition.
Yeah.
Which is basically just vector addition in the complex plane.
Exactly. Simple algebra.
And then how do you get the intensity? That's what we usually measure.
That's the other beautiful part. The intensity is proportional to the amplitude squared, AR2 Poland. With complex numbers, you get the square of the magnitude by multiplying the complex amplitude by its complex conjugate.
So, times...
Yes. You calculate $8 plus A2 times. When you multiply that out, you get A12 plus A22 plus A1 A2 EI phi plus A1 A2 EI.
Okay. And those last two terms combine, using Euler's formula again.
Right. AD theta plus EI theta 2 cot. So those last two terms become $2 A1 A2 to, or equivalently, $2 A1 A2 cos, since cosine is an even function.
So the final intensity is proportional to AR2 alls plus A22 plus A22 plus 2A1 A2.
That's the one. The first two terms, A12 plus A22.2, are just the sum of the individual intensities, what you'd get if they didn't interfere. But that last term, the $2 A1 A2, that is the interference term.
That's where all the physics of constructive and destructive interference lives. It depends entirely on the cosine of the phase difference, pay $5.
Exactly. If the phase difference is 0, or $2, or $2.40, etc., the cosine is +1, you get maximum addition. If the phase difference is DIL, or $3.55, etc., the cosine is maximum subtraction, possibly cancellation. And remember, that total phase difference, delta phi 2, phi ti 1, comes from two places, right?
Yes. Part of it is due to the difference in path length the waves travel, delta R law. That contributes tile delta R to the phase difference. The other part is any intrinsic phase difference, alpha, that we might build into the oscillators themselves. So delta phi, alpha k, delta R, Diller. Or you could flip the sign, depending on definition. The point is, both path length and source timing matter.
So let's recap this deep dive. We started with the idea that radiation comes from accelerated charges, and the field depends on retarded time.
Leading to that crucial dollar dependence for the radiation field, which means energy truly escapes, shown by the flux times area calculation being constant.
Then we saw how superposition works, especially with two sources, leading to interference patterns constructive and destructive addition based purely on phase difference.
Now we found that while the trig is hard, using rotating vectors, or even better, complex amplitudes, makes calculating the resultant intensity, including that key interference term, much, much easier.
This chapter really takes you from understanding static electricity to grasping the fundamentals of how basically all wireless communication and optical phenomena work.
It's a massive conceptual leap. It connects the source dynamics to the propagating wave and its detection far away. It's the heart of wave physics in electromagnetism.
Okay, excellent. Now thinking about that interference term, $2 A1 A2D, here's a final thought for you, the listener, to chew on. If you have two identical oscillators, so $A equals A22, what specific total phase difference, delta phi, would you need between them to guarantee the total intensity in some direction is exactly 0?
Think about the cosine function. What angle makes the delta phi equal to angus 1? That guarantees perfect cancellation when the amplitudes are equal.
Something to ponder. Thank you for joining us for this deep dive into Feynman's take on electromagnetic interference. We hope this helped solidify the concepts.
Until next time.